Everyone, it's 11:30 now, so we're just waiting for a few more of your EMBA friends to come in before we start the session. We already have Mr. Binesh, who is here with us, who's our guest speaker for the day, and we have Paramita as well. I think, Paramita, can you say hello?
Hi, Meena. Thank you.
So I think.
Hey, Paramita.
Yes,
Paramita, should we wait another few more minutes, or
just 5 minutes, please? Each one of you all can introduce yourself to the guest.
Yeah, it'll be nice to allow Binesh to know each of you, and it will allow some of us to get some networking done. All right, so who would like to start? I think we'll start with Mr. Vinay.
Hi, good morning everyone. Hi Binesh.
Hey Vinay.
Welcome, we are looking forward. My name is Vinay Sharma. I'm a group head of IT in ports and logistics company here. And I'm working here from last 20 years. So adaptive leadership is something is very close to many of us, I believe. And the current situation where COVID is making us to act differently, think differently, and the culture shift to bring those changes. So looking forward to your session. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinay.
Who'd like to go next?
I think I'll go ahead. Hi, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Mr. Menon. This is Ankita here. I am from EMBA batch 10 Mumbai. My other cohorts will be joining in 5-10 minutes. I'm currently heading sales for L&T Electrical and Automation, now Schneider Electric. The transition has happened just a week back. And since I'm in sales, yes, I'm hoping to learn a lot from this session because, as rightly mentioned by Mr. Sharma, during this pandemic, we all are looking out for adaptive leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Vishal wanted to go next.
Yeah, hi. Vishal, I'm from the EMBA batch 11. I currently heading a safety department of a shipping company. Earlier, I was sailing. I was a sailing master for 5 years. I have a long seafaring career. Now I've shifted ashore, and then looking forward to the course. And let's see what we can gain from this.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, Vishal.
Thank you.
Yeah, but then this is Ramesh Saraf here, and similar to Vishal, same EMBA batch 11, and even I've been at sea for 11 years, and then decided to step ashore. I'm now the general manager with Maersk Line, taking care of health, safety, environment, and quality matters for 350 ships that we operate. And I look forward to this session here.
You sound like both of you sound like the master of uncharted territory.
I know, like, literally, right?
Yeah, literally with sailing experience.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ramesh. Who would like to go next?
So I'll go next. This is Shibu here. Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Menon. Looking at the time zone. So I'm Shibu, and I come from an investment banking background. I used to be with Barclays Investment Bank. Till recently, I'm on a sabbatical right now due to personal issues. But like my colleagues, I'm also from batch EMBA 11. And as my colleagues also agree with me that I think at the moment, the need of the hour is adaptive leadership at all levels. I think a lot has changed. It's disrupted, I wouldn't say change. A lot of things have disrupted. And I think for all of us to learn and understand how we go forward would be a great advantage. So very, very looking forward to this session this morning.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I think Tapasya has unmuted herself, so maybe she wants to share something.
Sure. Hi everyone. Is this audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Hi guys, my name is Tapasya. I'm from EMBA batch 45 Dubai, and currently I'm working as a key account manager for a tech insurance company that's based out here in Dubai. And yes, looking forward to the session, and hopefully gonna learn a lot. Cheers.
Actually, 58 of them had registered, Binesh. So I thought I would wait for 5 minutes, but not to take much time. Let's begin, and we'll wait for the others to join eventually. Formally beginning, and a very warm welcome, Binesh, to SP Jain, and very, very thankful and highly regard this relationship, and very, very thankful for your support to us, and very happy that you have come to share very insightful insights based on your very rich experience in leadership and training and development. You're a thought leader, you're an expert of the field, and also a global leader in learning and OD. I think these are something which we studied, and I don't know, I'm an HR professional myself, and I see it getting extinct day by day, and it pains me somewhere to feel that the changes are disruptive, not just disrupting not only the setup, but huge things that we studied. I think I have studied, I practiced competency mapping and L&D, etc. And now to see you and to see the usage of various such concepts and fundamentals and models and framework that we did into practice is great. And have you, it's really an honor. I don't know if all of you all know, Binesh has been the 40 most among the 40 most talented T&D leader in India by the National Training and Development Congress. He has also been one of the 25 among the most influential T&D professionals by CHRO. These are huge accolades, actually, if you've gone through Binesh's profile. So I'll not take much time, and I would leave it up to you, and we are waiting to hear from you. And so a huge round of applause for Binesh, please. Everybody unmute yourself, and please let's applaud for him.
Thank you so much, Paramita. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to just, Meghna, just let me know if the presentation is visible now.
Yes, it's very visible. Yes.
All right. So I'm going to get started right away, since we anyway are a little behind schedule, so I'm not going to take too much time to set the context. And thank you, Paramita, Meghna, for organizing this, and for the warm introduction, Paramita. And looking forward to interacting with each one of you. I heard what you're looking forward to. It was good, I think, the opportunity to hear some inputs from the participants in terms of what is it that they're expecting out of the session. So hopefully, in the next 45 minutes to an hour that we have together, you get some additional insights or inputs into this topic. So the topic in itself is something that is very relevant. Like some of you said, we are navigating uncharted territories, aren't we? I mean, probably these are situations and scenarios that we'd not really planned on. And again, it's not just the last few months and COVID and things like that. I mean, for the past 20-25 years, everyone's been talking about the VUCA world, and how it's going to disrupt everything. It's only getting more and more real with every passing year. And now we are seeing it, and we're all living it on a daily basis. So how do you deal with it, and how do you build adaptive leadership traits, or how do you build adaptive leaders within the organization to be able to navigate through times like these? So that's what we're going to be discussing. Before we jump in, I have a question for you, and it'll be cool if you could put it in the chat window. Very simple question there. Are we dealing with more change today than humankind has ever faced? Do you agree, disagree, or do you think it's always been the same? So Ankita says yes. All right. Tapasya says disagree. All right. Interesting thought, Tapasya. Ramesh says yes. Sagarika, no. Change is part of our lives. So I see it's a very balanced response that I'm getting. For every yes, I'm getting a no. Interesting. Yes, consider the time frames. Don't think so. So, like I said, it almost seems like you guys have planned it out. Like, a yes would be followed by a no there. Okay, and you know what? I tend to agree with both types of responses that we are getting here, because yes, change has always been there. And this is a slide I kind of put together to illustrate the point that things have always changed, right? Like some of you said, it has always been there, you know, it's always, things change, we grow, we develop, change is constant, like Anupama's writing there, absolutely. And everything has changed around us. I mean, the way evolution has happened, you know, how societies were formed, and how as humankind, how we progress through all these centuries, it's definitely been happening and will continue to happen. However, for those of you who do say that, you know, yes, this is probably the biggest change or that we are dealing with, and you know, it's unprecedented times and things like that, absolutely, that is also true. Now, the reason why I say that is while change has always been happening, think of change like, and those of you who are familiar with accounting and financial terminology, think of it like compounding interest in finance, right? So the whole idea of compounding interest is after it crosses a certain threshold, that whole incremental thing just booms up into an exponential change, and which is exactly how change happens, you know. So you always had incremental changes over a period of time, but maybe we've come to a point where it's now happening exponentially. And that's why the smallest of things, when it changes, it kind of impacts all over. Somebody mentions, Vishal mentions there that this is not the first pandemic that the world is facing, absolutely right. But the impact of this pandemic probably is a lot more than it ever was. And then that's also because of the way things have changed around the world. Similarly, leadership theories and philosophies and concepts have also evolved over a period of time. And I've kind of put up like a timeline of sorts there of how different leadership philosophies and theories and concepts have evolved. And again, they'll continue to evolve. And it's not that something that was relevant earlier is not relevant today. I mean, some concepts, yeah, the great man theory, probably we don't buy that anymore. The trade theory still stays to some extent and so on. So there are things, you know, which we continue to use from concepts that existed in the past. And now we're talking about adaptive leadership. And adaptive leadership again is a thought process, and it's going to stay. It will, and it makes sense for us to understand what it is and be able to utilize the best out of it. So here's a quick poll based on exactly what we've been discussing so far. Here's a quick poll for you. Meghna, could you send the poll out? Okay, that's it. Your honest thoughts on change now that you know, we know it exists, but what do you think? Is it awesome? Well, meh, or no, please, no, not again. What do you think? Wow. Okay. No, I'm glad somebody is saying no, please, no, not again there. Okay, we're still waiting for some people to vote in, I guess. All right, just looking at what we have, clearly the majority response says that change is awesome, correct? And some people are kind of indifferent about it, and maybe some people dislike it completely. Irrespective of what your views are on it, you know, change is here to stay. Change continues. We've all spoken about it. We've all agreed on it. But to most of us who believe that change is awesome, change is great, and I hear it all the time, right? I mean, when you interact with dynamic people like yourselves, you know, leaders who are here to drive change in the industry and within corporations, you always tend to believe that it's a great thing and it's awesome. Now, okay, there. So here's something about that. We all love change to some degree, and you know, and like we saw in our poll just now, everybody says it's awesome. Now, for irrespective of how you approach change or what you think about change, and you know how adventurous you believe you are when it comes to these aspects, you always want some degree of certainty. You know, if anybody says that I love change and I don't care what the outcome is, you know, I just want to jump right in, probably they're not being absolutely honest to themselves. Because even, you know, if you're as adventurous as you see on the screen right now, you know, if you want to go bungee jumping but you would still like some certainty. You'd like to know if the bungee cord is good enough. You'd like to know the people who have set it up have the right experiences. You'd like to know, you know, what's the quality of the material that's being used, etc. And whatever information you can get beforehand, you would like to have that before you embark on any change journey, which is what we call you know, predictive analysis, or you know, being able to predict it to some degree. So the more accurately you can predict the outcome, the higher is your level of confidence about the change, the higher is your level of comfort with the change. And that's why even as leaders, when you're making decisions, right, when you're making real life business decisions, you're usually making decisions with limited information, which means, you know, you don't know what's going to happen next, but limited information, which means that you're always trying to gather as much data as possible to be able to make the right choice, to be able to make the right decisions. And the more you have it, the better. So always, whenever you're thinking about change, also think about how predictable is that change. And that's something that constantly we as human beings, we crave for that predictability. While we want the excitement of the unpredictable, we also crave the security of the predictability. And you know, there are different motivation theories which talk about you get your best performance when there is an equal amount of fear of failure and hope for success, right? Which talks about the same thing, which means there is uncertainty and there is some amount of predictability, which allows me to give my best performance. So keeping that in mind, you know, here's another question for you. How do you feel when you struggle to predict the outcome? And Meghna, how do we
So we have an open-ended poll here. So I would like all of you to log on to Menti. I'm just going to menti.com, and there's a code that you will get. Just enter the code and you can type out your answers, that we can, you know, we can see everybody's answers on the screen.
All right. So let's see what we get here.
So just go to menti.com and just use the code.
So the question again is, how do you feel when you struggle to predict the outcome? And let's face it, that's the reality of today, right? You can't always predict the outcome of your decisions, of the change journey that you're embarking on. So what does that make you feel? Your honest thoughts about your emotions, your feelings when you're anxious. So I'm glad somebody started us off on that one. Let's see what else we got. Anxious, frustrated, challenging, all right. Uncomfortable, worried, an urge to problem solve, cautious, restless, confused. Interesting. Challenged, nervous, chance. Interesting. Uncomfortable, worried, okay. Fingers crossed. Interesting. All right. Panic, handicapped, fear, hyper. Okay, I think we got quite a few inputs there. Like bad, judgy, okay. Whoa.
It's a good mix of positive and
Yeah, exactly. Again, I mean, if you were to actually think about the positive and the not so positive terms there, I think it weighs more towards the not so positive, right?
yeah, yeah.
And again, so I would really want you to correlate it with the poll question that we had, where majority of us said that, you know, we're excited about change. Change also means your ability to predict, right? Which as we said is not always there. And then when we are thinking about what it makes us feel when we are not able to predict the outcome, you do come across a mixed bag of emotions, but more negative emotions than positive if you were to look at it. Interesting.
I will stop sharing.
Yeah, okay. So then I share my screen again. Isn't that how we
Yes,
do that?
yes.
All right. Okay, we got that. Do you have my screen again?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Meghna. Okay, so you know we looked at all those words and like I said, we got angry, frustrated, nervous, and everything, and also excited. But I want you to think about, you know, when we think about words like angry, frustrated, afraid, etc., where is this actually coming from? And again, this is something that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. You've seen this at some point or the other when we talk about, you know, the reptilian brain, the limbic brain, and the neocortex. Now, most of these negative connotation words that we spoke of come from our reptilian brain, right? Which has to do with crisis, which puts us in that fight or flight mode. So whenever there is a crisis of sorts, when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, there is absolute inability to predict the outcome. Chances are that your reptilian brain kind of takes over. I think you know, one of the best examples that I can think of from the recent past is of course the COVID pandemic and how people reacted to it initially when it started off, right? I don't know how it was in Dubai or you know, some of you have joined us from Mumbai, but here in Singapore, one of the first things that happened is the supermarkets and department stores ran out of toilet paper and noodles. Now, that clearly was not a decision made by the neocortex, right? I mean, why would you stock up on toilet paper, right? The moment you hear about something which is uncertain, look at what part of your brain is activated now. It's all about survival, and for whatever reason, the reptilian mind felt that, okay, I need noodles and I need toilet paper. That's what I need to survive, and that's what people stocked up on. We all saw that happening. I mean, whether you witnessed it firsthand or you read about it, but I know it happened in different parts of the world, right? So that was clearly not a logical, rational decision-making process. Why did people get there? Because whenever they were faced with this uncertainty, it was all about the reptilian crisis mindset taking over and not allowing you to make decisions in the right frame of mind. And for you to be able to do that, you need to be using your neocortex, which means, you know, your ability to think, your ability to kind of rationalize and look at the logic of things and work your way through it, which is what in the business world, which is what in the corporate scenario, we are all striving to do, right? Making the right decisions, not purely based on your instinct, not based on your, you know, what your reptilian brain is telling you to do, but based on logic and rationality and data and all of those things, which allows you to make the right decisions. Now, if you were to actually study the change process or the change cycle in different ways, and irrespective of what model of the change process you look at, it typically takes us from the reptilian through the limbic, through the towards the neocortex. So the moment you hear about a change, everybody receives it in the reptilian brain, which means that, you know, the moment you hear about something is changing, irrespective of who you are, whether you're the frontline sales guy in the organization or you're the CEO of the company, irrespective of what level you're at, the moment you hear about a change, it first hits you there. But it's your ability to move it from the reptilian to the limbic and to the neocortex, to be able to process the information, move past the change cycle, and arrive at the point where you're able to transition into the change, and not only transition yourself but lead others into that change is what we need to learn, or what we need to work at. Now, again, going back to the recent COVID scenario, right? As global citizens, we've all seen everybody kind of struggle and grapple with the lack of data and inability to make the right decisions. Be it the leading health organizations, or be it countries, where you actually look for leadership, where you actually hope that someone's going to tell you what's the right thing to do. No one was able to accurately predict what's the right thing to do. In fact, so often, people retract from their statements. They said, "Oh, this is what we should do," and everyone said, "Okay, so let's do this." And then, in a couple of days, you get a statement saying that, "Oh, you know what? That's not what we were supposed to do. Maybe this is what's the right thing to do," which means something is missing, even when you rely purely on decision making in this context, right? Where this ideally to us is where we are today, where we look at data, and there is so much talk about data analytics, and get as much information as possible so that you're able to process it and you're able to arrive at the right decision. It works, but it doesn't work all the time. Where does it work? It works when you're making decisions regarding technical problems. So again, the COVID situation was not exactly a technical problem. You couldn't feed in tons of data and expect an AI to come up with a solution. That's not how it worked. And the reason it didn't work is because you didn't have relevant data. I mean, as we were talking about, pandemics have happened in the past. Yes, they did. But the last one was about 100 years ago. So is your data really relevant from the time that it happened before to where you are today? So if in the absence of relevant data, you're not able to do your data analytics modeling and things like that and come up with the right information. So not all problems are technical problems. You also have problems which need adaptive leadership, and that's what adaptive leadership is all about. It's about those other kind of problems, which is not just about feeding data and getting the solution out of it, but it's the kind of problems which need someone to use their skills to be able to use their judgment and make the right decision. So again, as we were talking about change, mostly adaptive leadership is relevant when there is change, because if there is no change, then it's quite easy, right? I mean, you're relying on the tried and tested. You've seen this before. It's happened before. You've got reference points, and you build on it. But again, I don't want to spend too much time about the theory bit of it, because you can all read up, and I'm guessing you already have read up about adaptive leadership at some point or the other. But just to put it in context, right? I mean, the term adaptive leadership was first introduced somewhere in 1994 when Ronald Heifetz wrote this book on leadership without easy answers, is what he called. And in that book, he first spoke about the term, or coined the term, adaptive leadership, but didn't really expand too much on it up until in 2002, when Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky together wrote this book called Leadership on the Line. And that's where for the first time they spoke about the model of adaptive leadership in an organization context. And what they said is, it's about mobilizing people around you. Whenever you're faced with a challenging situation, how do you mobilize the people around you? And at the end of it, you achieve your objective. You and in their words, emerge triumphantly at the end. So that's what adaptive leadership essentially is. There are numerous iterations to that model which are available now. People have come up with all kinds of work which is built on it, and all of it is relevant in some context or the other. But one of the things that I do want to touch upon is, as part of what Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky spoke of, is authority versus leadership. They said that authority is pretty relevant, in certain cases. For example, a medical doctor has certain authority over the patient. They can tell the patient what needs to be done. Similarly, maybe a school teacher can tell a student what needs to be done, and so on. And also in the workplace, a boss has, or a manager has, certain authority over their direct reports. They could hire them. They could tell them what needs to be done. They could even fire them when needed. But leadership is different than authority. Leadership is not so much about telling people what needs to be done. Leadership has got more to do with influencing people. And you may or may not have direct authority over them. So it's got more to do with influencing, either with authority or without authority, but getting people to mobilize in the right direction. And we spoke about the difference between technical and adaptive problems before. So, when it's a technical problem, you don't necessarily need adaptive leadership. Your authority can take care of technical problems, or to be honest, in today's day and age, if it's a technical problem, you don't even need anybody to look at it. You could have your systems to take care of it. You could have your AI to take care of it, right? You don't really need a leader to work through that process. But it's only when you're dealing with adaptive problems that you really need leadership to come to the fore. And more, the problems that we are facing these days are problems of adaptive nature. So having got this context around it, let's do another one of those fun word thingies that Meghna pulled up for us. And this time your question is, what do you believe are the characteristics of an adaptive leader? So if you could just come up with whatever keywords, phrases come to your mind when you think about characteristics of an adaptive leader.
So everyone can just log on back onto menti.com with the code, and you can enter your answers. It could be maybe one answer, two answers, three answers, depending on what comes to your mind.
Okay, thank you for getting us started there. Resilience, high EQ, interesting. What else we got? Well, receptive, composed, calm, agile, innovative, accepting, receptive, emotional intelligence, innovative, resilient, patience, calm. Okay. Creativity, composed, embrace. Very interesting choice of words there. Optimistic. Wow. Challenger.
We have some on the chat as well. Art of Negotiation by Dr. Gary, who is the Dean of the EMBA program. And we have Adaptability by Sandeep.
Art of Negotiation and Adaptability. Thank you. Yeah, makes sense. Persuasive, true. All right. Very interesting thoughts there. And all of it makes absolute sense, right? I mean, if you were able to do all of these things, you would clearly be an adaptive leader. Bold decisions, absolutely. I think we've pretty much nailed it here. Everything that you need to be an adaptive leader, I see on the screen right now.
Jagdish has added collaborative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Very good thoughts there. So I think, are we getting more, or?
We have 22 responses. If you're happy with this, we can move on.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered the spectrum here. We've got all the relevant open to team ideas, resilience. Oh, I think we've got everything and more when it comes to characteristics of adaptive leaders. So we're good. Thank you, Meghna. Okay, and there we go. So, there are, again, like I said, the whole concept of adaptive leadership is available. I'm sure you've got, books you've read up on it. In fact, the best way to read up on it would be Leadership on the Line. That's the book that initially spoke about that concept, but you could build up more, read up more about it. When I looked around, one of the models that I found to be most relevant, like I said, a lot of people have worked on it and built on it, but this is one of the models that I came across, which I thought was very easy to kind of understand and implement. So it talks about 4 different aspects around adaptive leadership. So of course, we need all the characteristics that you just listed out over there, but what do you need them for? To be specifically to be able to navigate business environments, lead with empathy. I noticed a lot of people did mention emotional quotient there. Absolutely. Self-correction and reflection is also something that you need. And ultimately, you should be able to create a win-win solution for all parties involved, right? So if you're able to do all of these, you would be able to lead using adaptive leadership. So in order to be able to do any of these things, or pretty much all of these things, it kind of ties in very nicely with Daniel Goleman's concept of emotional intelligence, right? So if you were to look at, these are our 12 competencies or elements of emotional intelligence that Daniel Goleman laid out in these 4 domains. So if anyone were able to do all of these things, and you're able to get better with your emotional quotients or your emotional intelligence competencies, you would be able to navigate through any situation and be able to demonstrate adaptive leadership. So it's about emotional self-awareness to begin with, which means, are you self-aware the moment change hits you, right? Are you self-aware to realize that what part of my brain is being triggered right now? How am I reacting to it, to the situation, and how do I move past this? And similarly, how do you manage yourself in terms of your emotions, your ability to adapt to what's changing, what's going on around you? Achievement orientation, I think, is very, again, those of you who are familiar would know that Daniel Goleman was actually mentored by David McClellan, right? And so there's clearly the connect over there when he talks about achievement orientation, because if the whole purpose of adaptive leadership is to come out winning at the end of the challenge, which means that you've got to have that focus, you've got to have that mindset of coming through that situation and winning, in the process. So obviously you need to be positive. And then social awareness is how do you work with other people, and relationship management, again, how do you build on it? How do you work with everybody else in the organization? How do you mobilize teams? How do you ensure that you get teams moving in the right direction? How do you help others deal with their EQ? Because in times of change, you're bound to get a lot of conflict also when people have strong opinions and thoughts around different aspects. So all of these emotional intelligence competencies are very relevant to being an adaptive leader. Now, here's something that again, this is a correlation that I kind of thought of in terms of, and again, purely based on my observations of the leaders that I've worked with and what I see in organizations, right? This is the technology adoption life cycle. So you would have seen this in one form or the other. It's also the consumer behavior life cycle, etc. You have your innovators, the early adopters, you have the early majority, late majority, and you have the laggards, right? So when it comes to either adopting any kind of new technology or any kind of consumer behavior, we typically talk about this. But in a leadership context also, you can actually look at this same framework. What that means is people who are able to deal with change, as soon as it hits, are our adaptive leaders. the ones that can interpret what's happening, are able to, mobilize people around them, are able to make the right choices, or at least are able to move forward immediately rather than waiting, are our adaptive leaders. And then once you come to the chasm, and then the majority kind of catches on, that's majority of your leaders. They are doing what they are doing because somebody else in a different business or a different business unit within an organization, or maybe in a different world area or a country, have tried it out already. An adaptive leader has tried it out already somewhere, and then the majority of the leaders kind of jump into the bandwagon, make those decisions, and lead their organizations that way. And then the laggards, as we talk of in the technology adoption life cycle, when it comes to leadership, I don't even think these people are leaders, right? I mean, you cannot be a leader if you finally get your organizations moving in that direction after everybody else has tried it out. It's, in fact, I'm reminded of the Peter principle, where it says that in any hierarchy, right, an employee tends to rise to his or her level of incompetence. That's where you would find the laggards when it comes to leadership. It's people who plateaued. They're not in the right job anymore. So as organization development professionals, we tend to take a look at that and make decisions around moving those people, because clearly they're not in the right job. Now, when it comes to within organizations, right, how do we develop people to ensure that we are building more adaptive leaders? Now that you understand what adaptive leadership is, you understand why it's so relevant, but in an organization context, or even for yourselves, when you're looking at building yourself to be stronger when it comes to these traits or competencies, one of the models that I found to be very useful is something that Corn Ferry came up with a few years ago. They call it the 4D, or the 4-dimension model of development. To me, this is the most holistic framework around people development that has come out in the recent years. Now, the reason why it makes sense is it does not look at competencies or traits in isolation. It says that, okay, when you're looking at a person, you got to look at the whole person. So if you have to build your competencies, so in our adaptive leadership context, think about competencies as the EQ competencies, the ones that we looked at, the Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence competencies. Those are things, those are behaviors which can be learned, right? So you can build on those, you can learn those behaviors, you build your competencies. You need the right set of experiences. If you've never tried it out in the past, maybe you cannot. So you need the right set of experiences to be able to demonstrate or learn and get better with your adaptive leadership. But more importantly, it's the things that lie below the surface, as you can see in the iceberg kind of analogy, right? It's the traits and the drivers. Now, traits are inherently your personality preferences. It's who you are, right? And drivers, again, is part of who you are. It's what motivates you to do the things that you do. Now, traits and drivers are very individual specific, are very person specific. So when you're thinking of building adaptive leaders in an organization context, or let's say you're thinking of building yourself up as an adaptive leader, you need to not only just focus on the competencies that are relevant or getting the right set of experiences, you also need to do some self-reflection. Or you've got to, as an organization, we need to take a look at the traits or the drivers of the individual to see if they are in the right frame of mind, if they're the right potential, if they're the right fit to be able to take on these kind of challenges. And once you understand what the makeup of the individual is in terms of their traits and their drivers, then it's about identifying that and then guiding them towards the right learned behavior. So which means that for some personality traits, it might come a lot easier to be an adaptive leader than others. but it's important that we are able to identify that and then build on it, rather than doing like a broad brush approach and say that, okay, everybody needs to be trained on these EQ competencies, everybody needs to get these kind of structured experiences, and we'll have adaptive leaders. That's not how it works. So you've got to look at the holistic approach to building talent and creating more adaptive leaders. How do we do that today? And again, this is something which is practiced pretty much by every organization today, which is the 70-20-10 framework of development, right? So, which means that majority of the development, again, don't get too hung up on the percentages there, but majority of your development actually happens through your own learning experiences, your first-hand learning experiences, right? It is when you solve problems by yourself, you get to practice the skills that you've learned, is how you learn on the job, or informally, as they say. About 20% of your learning comes through other people, which is your peers, which is the people that you work with, collaborative interactions with different teams that you're involved in. It could also be more structured in terms of having a coach or a mentor, guide you through the process. And only about 10% of your total development is actually dependent on what you learn through structured programs. It could be a classroom training and an online module or any of those things. Now, keeping this framework in mind, when we look at building more adaptive leaders and preparing more adaptive leaders to deal with uncharted territories, as we spoke of, we want to give them more and more of the 70% along with the 10 and the 20. And how do we do that is, of course, you could put them on projects, give them assignments, put them in different roles. Also, in terms of another quick fix that we've figured is assigning action learning projects. So when you put people into action learning projects, it gives them a first-hand experience of dealing with situations that they've never encountered in the past. So these are, again, a few things that we do at the moment. So I just thought that just to give you a perspective of how organizations today are kind of building and working towards it. Parting thoughts on the topic before we transition to Q&A. I believe to be an adaptive leader, you've got to reflect on what happens inside of you, what happens within when change occurs outside, right? So whenever anything changes in the environment, immediately how quickly can you reflect on what's happening inside of you? What feelings or emotions are you facing? What part of your brain is being triggered right now? Are you grappling with fear and uncertainty? Are you dealing with certain emotions? Are you looking at what's the logical thing to do, etc.? So spend time reflecting on what's happening inside of you. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to observe yourself in a very objective manner, you will definitely get better at how you deal with scenarios. You need courage to be an adaptive leader. The reason you need courage is not just about taking a stand and taking decisions which others may not intuitively understand or agree with you there, but also the fact that for you personally, it's going to be difficult. I mean, doing anything new means that you let go of something which has worked for you in the past, right? You're trying something which we spoke of predictability, right? So you don't know if it's going to pan out the way you visualize it to be. There is no data backing up your decision. And in order to do that, you need to have the courage to make those decisions. We've spoken of emotional intelligence. Everybody has spoken of emotional intelligence. It's been around since the 90s. And that's why I think it's I like to describe it using the oxymoron there, which is an underrated buzzword. It's been a buzzword for decades now, but still most underutilized when it comes to leadership. I deal with leaders, whenever there is a challenging situation and you do a 360 analysis and you try and understand what's not working. More often than not, it boils down to the EQ of the said leader, and it's all around us. right? So it's something that the sooner you're able to understand and build your emotional intelligence, the easier it's going to be for you to deal with challenging situation, uncharted territories, as we said. And finally, like any other leadership model that you ever come across, it ought to be intentional. Leadership is a choice, right? So you could sit back and you could wait for things to happen. You could be the early majority or the late majority or the laggard there. But if you really want to be an adaptive leader, you've got to be intentional about what you're doing. I mean, the moment you see that there is a situation which needs your leadership, don't just stand back. Jump in, figure out, use your EQ, use whatever data is available to you, but more importantly, have the courage to make those decisions and drive forward. With that, I'm done with what I had. And you could look it up in Google, or else happy to take your questions as well. So we open for questions, Meghna, in case there are any.
Thank you, Binesh. There's one question that's come in from Mosam. Mosam, do you want to ask it instead of me reading out? So that at least we get to see your face and hear your voice.
Yeah. Hi, Binesh.
Hey,
so what I was thinking is, like, you mentioned about the traits that a person needs to have. It comes from within. So I was just curious, like, what all traits do we look for? What are the positive, favorable traits that we should look for?
Sure. So absolutely. So again, to understand traits, right? So traits is a broader term which talks about preferences inherently. So whenever we say traits or personality traits, it's about an inherent preference that an individual has to a certain course of action, right? So in the easiest example of trait is introversion and extroversion, right? I mean, it's just a preference that an individual has, which means that's how you are wired. Now, when it comes to adaptive leadership, or when it comes to traits related to EQ, it's just your ability to connect with people. It's also your risk-taking ability. One of the traits is your risk aptitude. So some people have a higher appetite for risk than others, and for people who have a higher risk appetite, it might be a little easier for them to embark on the adaptive leadership journey than others. Right? So if you're extremely cautious as an individual, you might really find it difficult to make those decisions. Then again, this is your inherent preference. That doesn't mean you can't do the opposite of what your inherent preference is, which is to say that even if you are an extremely cautious individual, once you understand that the right trait for this situation is risk-taking, you can learn how to be better at your risk-taking as a trait. So it's a learned behavior which you could look at. Yeah. Thanks, Marcin. Is there another?
Yeah, we have Shamal who's asked another question. Shamal, do you want to come up on camera?
Hi, Mr. Menon. So my question is based on on this program. So I just wanted to understand that a few organizations which have a large hierarchy, how does by the time you adapt to this new change of new culture, it's already a passe, as you showed in the timeline of of technology. So how do we make it more flexible, or is there a way that we could increase the pace to make it more flexible?
I think that's a very valid point, Shamal. And increasingly, irrespective of the size of the organization or the levels of hierarchy in organizations, you would notice that organizations are moving to a model where decisions are made at the smallest team level, at the smallest unit level. And the reason it's done is because of the way things are changing, right? I mean, if you were to think about how things used to be maybe a few decades ago, where you would get approvals from the head office before a significant decision is made in the market or at a field level. You don't do that anymore. People are empowered because you've realized that if you were to stick to that kind of a hierarchy and a chain of command, it would be impossible to survive in today's marketplace. So that the authority to make those decisions and as is being moved to the smallest possible unit level today. And that's something which is happening. Yeah, thank you.
We have Vinay. Mr. Vinay, do you want to share your question on camera?
Yeah. Thank you, Vinesh. I think it was a very good insight about adaptive leadership. My question is in the whole context, that like how's the role of culture play, that whenever we do such dynamic shift, and how you handle that.
Absolutely. Again, I think it's ultimately boils down to the culture of the organization. It boils down to what's your leadership telling you in terms of, what's your senior management telling you, what's your senior leadership telling you in terms of what happens when you fail. The only reason people shy away from making these decisions, or if in your experience you've realized that somebody made a decision which didn't really work out well and they were heavily penalized for it, that if that's the culture of the organization, people are not going to feel comfortable making these decisions, that they're going to shy away from it and keep pushing it out as far as possible. But if it's a culture like, say organizations like 3M, where you're rewarded for the mistakes that you make, because it's a culture of innovation, right, where people are free to make those mistakes, then it becomes that much more easier for people to try different things and make those decisions as they move around. So I think you made a very valid point that the culture of the organization has a direct implication in terms of how adaptive leadership kind of grows within that organization or not. Absolutely.
We have Sujan, who's asked an interesting question. Sujan, are you online? Would you like to share your question?
Yeah, hi. So I actually just wanted to understand, we these days we really focus a lot on public speaking, right? And then, leaders are expected to speak, have that connection, to the audiences. So how important it is for, any leader to have a public speaking, okay? And then are all good leaders, are all good speakers? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujan. That is indeed an interesting question. So, when we talk about leadership, you must understand that leadership is influence, right? So leadership means your ability to influence other people. How do you influence people? The only way you can influence people is through communication, right? I mean, of course, you can influence by your behavior, you can walk the talk and things like that. But the easiest and the most impactful way of creating an influence is through your communication. And that's the reason why, like you said, most leaders are good with communication. Now, again, that's also a trait, right? Your ability to communicate, or public speaking per se, is a trait, which means it's a natural preference or an inherent ability that somebody possesses more than others, and so on. But the best part about it, it's a very easy to learn behavior. So irrespective of where these people start off, in their journeys as public speakers, as you grow through the organization, by the time you are at a CXO level, hopefully you've had enough experiences and enough coaching and training around it, and you've built your abilities to be a reasonably good public speaker, because it is indeed required for you to be able to do that job. And it's not just about influencing the larger, in your town hall meetings, it's not just about influencing the larger employee base, but also when you're in those smaller meeting rooms, when you're sitting in the boardroom, are you able to effectively articulate your thoughts to get the board to agree to the direction that you're proposing or not, right? So it is definitely a skill which is needed for leaders to be successful, I'd say. Thank you, Sujan.
Thank you. I think we have a last question from Shamoil again. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Do SOPs limit the scope of creative change? I don't know if you want to add something more, Shamoil.
Yeah, I think
not really. I just had it's just a question because so where I am from in a hotel industry, because of the way we function, there are a lot of SOPs in terms of how to handle guests and etc.
Correct.
So I just want to understand that, does that limit the scope for change?
So, and if you recollect, we spoke that of two types of problems that an individual or an organization or a leader faces. So you have the technical problems and you have the adaptive problems. Just talking in context of adaptive leadership, a SOP or a standard operating procedure can only help you in a technical problem, which means it's been done before. There is a set process to do it, and after B, C happens, and after C, D happens, and so on. So you've laid it out. But adaptive leadership is or an adaptive problem is one where you come across a situation which has not been thought of. And like you said, change, so if there is a change, like in your hotel industry, there is a laid out process. When the guest comes, this is what you're supposed to do, and then this is what you're supposed to do. But what if something goes wrong in that process, right? If you've not spoken about, what if your guest has a heart attack while they are at the check-in counter? If that's not mentioned in the SOP, is your front office guy going to Google it, or is he going to pull out the manual, or is he going to do something right that moment to take care of the situation, right? So that's why adaptive leadership is, or adaptive problems require a different kind of mindset than what an SOP can provide you. All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the group? Take the silence as a no. If you do, you can pop it on the chat.
Yeah.
Pranav.
Yeah. So my question was, where does adaptivity convert to hopping? I mean, if you're an adaptive leader, you're take decisions fast and you can predict the future. But at a point where you are changing your decisions too frequently, that's also not good. There has to be a balance.
True.
So what would be or is there a threshold where adaptive leader becomes a hopper?
So again, that's an interesting perspective or a way of looking at it. But to me, it's not so much about changing your decisions as much as making those decisions as and when needed. So it's about, again, picking a direction, right? And you will only change that direction once you realize that what you started off on is not the right path. And oftentimes, because you don't have your predictive analytics, you don't have data to rely on, oftentimes it's quite possible that the path that you initially set out on is not leading the right way. And I think, again, all of us have probably witnessed it with the COVID situation. You've seen established institutions doing what you would refer to as hopping. And that's primarily because there wasn't enough data to back it up. But that doesn't mean that you're going to wait till you have that data. If that were the case, we would still be waiting on some concrete information for us to be able to make decisions, right? So you've got to make those decisions. It's quite possible you'll have to change those decisions. But again, it's about the quality of the decisions that you'd make, I'd say. If someone's changing decisions every day, or they're changing decisions evening from what they made in the morning, by evening they're changing those decisions, that's bound to lead to frustration within the teams. So yeah, it's somewhere, the balance is somewhere in between. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep. Then I have one question as well, if we can take that.
Yes,
Binesh, first of all, thank you for the lovely presentation. Very insightful. I mean, I come from an operational background, and more often than not, we see the leaders, and we are dealing more with technical problems. Of course, we have our own share of adaptive concerns as well. But then for the technical issues, we see that the leaders are quite demanding for data. And then I mean, I've also read a book where it says, if you have 30% data, it's actually good enough to consider making a decision, where some leaders would actually want up to 80 or 90% of data, and then that delays the decision making process. But how would then in that case, how would the adaptability fit in that case in a technical matter?
So, Ramesh, I'd like to, thank you for the question and how you put it. But I think it entirely brings it back to my technology adoption curve slide, if you recollect, right? So the people who are willing to make decisions with just 30% of the data are our adaptive leaders. People who are asking for 80% of the data before they actually make a decision are our laggards or the late majority, which means you show me everything, you let me know that it can never fail, only then will I set on this path. And there is less and less room for that type of leadership today. Because let's face it, we're all dealing with situations, and again, COVID or no COVID, that's the business reality, right? I mean, last year, before all this hit us, I'm sure you would have noticed that even then, right? I mean, you have leaders who are able to make decisions with limited set of data, and that's what's required, because the marketplace is as dynamic as it has ever been. So we need to be able to build more leaders who can make decisions based on that. And you have competencies like situational adaptability and things like that, which allow you to or dealing with ambiguity, for that matter, to be able to make decisions in an ambiguous scenario. So those are skills which can be learned. Yeah. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Ramesh. Yeah.
I just have a question in reference with Ramesh's question regarding 70-80% data. Normally, people say that data never goes wrong, and if somebody has a 70 or 80% data, then anybody can make a decision based on the data. He or she is not a leader, right? So
exactly. And if you recollect, going back to the same slide, I said the laggards are not leaders.
And just to support that, it's more the fear of the leader being able to take it up to the management, and that the fear that the decision that the leader is taking does not go wrong, and then that
data to blame on.
Exactly.
Wrong, but then data is never wrong. So.
And that's exactly why it can only work for technical problems, because you will not have enough data for all the real world problems that you get, the adaptive problems that you get. And that's why one of the things in the parting thoughts, if you recollect, I said courage. That's what makes you an adaptive leader, to have that courage to make that decision in the absence of data. Like you rightly said, Ankita, I mean, if you have all the data and then you make a decision, well, and you don't need a leader there, and AI bot could do it for me, right? So, all right, thank you.
All right, so thank you so much, Mr. Binesh. We'll just take a quick virtual group photo. That's traditional every time we have a recap session. And I think our students will connect with you on LinkedIn if they have any further questions. And it'll be nice if anyone wants to even post the session takeaways on LinkedIn on your own profiles and tag SP Jain and Mr. Binesh. I think that'll be really
that'll be cool.
Feel free to do that. So I think everyone put on their cameras and put on your big smiles so we can take the. Parmita, do you want them in any specific poses or anything, or we just smile?
We'll rush back to class, I guess.
Okay, quick smile.
I think we've exceeded the allocated time, so I'm sorry about that.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you, Mr. Binesh, for that very, very well structured and very insightful points there on everything on leadership, decision making. I love the word mobilizing. It's very important to mobilize, I think, in these times. So thank you very much. I'll see you again. I'll be sending you, because it's an online session, I'm not able to give you some token from our end. I'll be sending a certificate very soon.
That's cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Taken a few photographs, but I'll take one more. So please put on.
We did that already. Okay. I
thought you were talking, so I'll take one more. I'll take one more.
Cheese.
Cheese, everyone. One more. I want the smiling Binesh.
Thank you.
Anupama has a very nice smile. It's really standing out. Thank you. I got the photographs.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
It's been fun. I love the questions. I love the engagement. Thank you so much. It's been very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. And a final, everyone can fill in the feedback form. That would be most appreciated. maybe you can share on your WhatsApp group so you can do it in your own time. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye. Bye.